I'm going to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Trustee Hargett?
Here.
Trustee Levin?
Here.
Trustee Mirabella?
Here.
Trustee McCarthy?
Here.
Trustee Weiss?
Here.
Trustee Whitmore?
Here.
Mayor Bruno?
Here. Tonight's invocation I will provide. Lord God, we give you thanks for your many abundant blessings upon us. And we thank you for the opportunity to meet this evening. We humbly ask that you be in our midst as we make decisions which we pray will be pleasing to you. We ask you to guide us in wisdom and love. In your goodness, we ask you to bring an end to this pandemic so that we may live more fully as your children. Help us to promote laws and policies which create jobs so that our people may return to work. We pray that you protect all those in positions of authority, especially police and all first responders. May we all respect them while working peacefully to root out any corruption. Enlarge our hearts to see you in all those we serve and meet, so that peace may reign throughout our land, nation, and the world. We ask this all in Jesus' name, amen. First item, I need a motion to approve the minutes from the July 7th, 2020 virtual regular board meeting.
So moved, Trustee Mirabella.
Second, Trustee Weiss.
Any discussion on those minutes? I'll ask for a roll call.
Hargett?
Aye.
Levin?
Pass.
Mirabella?
Aye.
McCarthy?
Aye.
Weiss?
Aye.
Whitmore?
Aye.
Motion carried. We move on to Mayor's report. We have nothing, which is quite amazing. I don't remember that happening before. So we move on to Village Administrator's report. Greg Jackson.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I just want to go through a few items real quick before we get to the item that's listed on the agenda. We have received communication from the the Lake County Municipal League about applying for reimbursement through an intergovernmental agreement for the CARES Act. I have reviewed that intergovernmental agreement with Attorney Long. We are going to submit it for ratification to the board in the first meeting in August. Because of time constraints and the submission being July 31st, the material related to that will have to be signed prior to July 31st. But I'll put it before the board for ratification. What this does is give us reimbursement for a number of expenses we've incurred as a result of the pandemic. We've been on Lake County, the Lake County government's back, and I say that with tongue in cheek, to make sure that we got our share of the money, as did every other municipality throughout Lake County, to help support the funding that we had to expend regarding PPE, staffing, and some other items relevant to responding to the pandemic. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the new superintendent of Zion Benton High School. Dr. Rodriguez will be meeting with me at Village Hall just as an introduction. I had reached out to the superintendent to congratulate him on his appointment from Proviso schools to the Zion Benton School District, and they responded and would like to meet. So there'll be a introductory conversation, and I will update the board as to any content that's relevant that came out of there. I have reviewed the 78 properties that the village owns, the parcels. downloaded the appropriate maps, and I'm doing a final evaluation on properties that we may want to look at collect as a village to either utilize or potentially put up for sale. Public education documentation is being created now for the upcoming referenda on the clerk's position. I know that we've been quiet with budget and everything else going on, that we haven't had that discussion, but I am putting together the documentation, excuse me, to be distributed to go out to the public regarding the upcoming November referenda. Lisa Shaw, myself, and Julie Rittenhouse are working on the transition from Lisa as a result of Lisa leaving and transferring Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer responsibilities over to myself and some other responsibilities over to Julie. Myself and Superintendent Niergarten met today to talk about permits for right-of-way as it pertains to utilities, as well as adjustments that would be required to the fee schedule because of fees that are either outdated or haven't been updated. I guess those are the same thing. But we'll also be looking at the fees throughout the other departments as well. The fire department was awarded a grant of $4,345, which is a matching grant. We applied for that earlier in the year through ComEd and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, and just received word that we were awarded our portion of the matching grant. That grant's before the board for approval this evening. I attended my first meeting since being appointed local government director for the land bank. We are looking at potential funding to acquire properties as part of the land bank, and looking at opportunities to turn around and take properties that are either in foreclosure or in distress to renovate those properties and put them back on a productive tax rolls. We should be looking over the next few months at properties that would fall under that criteria in Winthrop Harbor. We have had communication from the Illinois ICOPS regarding union negotiations. Our first union negotiation with the ICOPS for our police department will take place on August 22nd. We will be formulating our counter proposal to their proposal between myself, Chief Brumlick, Deputy Chief Moan, and Mayor Bruno. The appropriation ordinance was put on file with the county clerk post the approval of the board in the last board meeting. We are looking currently now at people that are companies that are interested in bidding on the health insurance for our employees, trying to find something that may be a little more, have a little less impact on our operating budget. That has just begun. We are as I said earlier, we're currently reviewing our fee schedule across departments to get rid of the old, to turn around and look at what's not necessary, and to update some of the fees to be comparable to neighboring communities. I have been asked or invited to be a speaker at the Lake County Municipal Roundtable, which will consist of mayors throughout the county and managers throughout the county, to talk about our response in Winthrop Harbor to the pandemic. I was humbled to be asked to be one of the panelists. That will be taking place on this Thursday. Obviously, our work and our communication with the Lake County Municipal League and the Lake County mayors and managers has had some kind of impact of some of the things that we've been able to accomplish in our small village, to ask them to have a speaker from our village. So I'm pretty excited about the opportunity that's in front of us. We have we have an opening for a full-time police officer in the police department. I have restated to all department heads and for the purpose of the the police commission, that we are under a hiring freeze. We will not be bringing on additional employees at this point in time. unless we find something out of necessity that would compromise public safety or public health. At that point, I would bring that before the board. But as of right now, I've directed the police chief and all other departments to be cognizant of the fact that we are under a hiring freeze. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, in regards to items that we're working on. The item that's on the agenda is the Winthrop Harbor pageant proposal. I think the staff memo I provided to the board is pretty self-explanatory. I was approached by a group of community members who had concerns about the current pageant program, most specifically how that program impacted the participants or would-be participants, both as they participated and post their participation. This group had brought forward that they were interested in forming a separate entity to continue moving the pageant program forward, and that they wanted to achieve the village board's recognition of that program as being the program, quote unquote, of Winthrop Harbor.
Hey, Greg, I'm sorry.
Yes.
This is Trustee Marabella, and I just got a question for Attorney Long before we go into this depth of this. It's to my understanding, as long as I've been in this village, and as long as I've been a part of any of this, the mayor does all that. It's nothing to do with the village. The mayor has the full say of what goes on, and the mayor should be the person dealing with this, in my opinion. I don't think we need to drag it into a board thing. I think the mayor has the right and has every power to decree what he wants, since we have nothing to do with this. That's just my opinion.
If I could interject, the recognition comes in the form, and then this is where the recognition comes in. It's not which program is. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but the recognition comes in the form of a $500 scholarship that the village board approves as part of the budget. It also comes with the recognition of we will turn around and allow facilities to be used, which I would contend is a board's decision, just as the budget would be, just as anything else where we would take an asset and make it available to an entity that is not under the direct control of the village.
If the mayor changes his mind. If he doesn't, it's a moot point. Correct?
I would defer to the attorney.
Well, that's what to me, it's common sense. If we move forward the way we are and the mayor decides we're not doing any different and we're keeping what we're doing, we don't even have to get involved. It's a done deal. We go on doing business how we are. Now, on the other hand, if he chooses to make a change, then we should get involved and do all this stuff. But otherwise, I think it's a moot point. It's on the mayor's throne. He decides what he's going to do. And then if it comes to what you're talking about, then the village board gets involved. Otherwise, we shouldn't be even involved in this, in my opinion.
Well, and here's the only reason we got involved with this. Well, first of all, I would disagree and say, respectfully, the village board as a body approves how we expend our money. So all I'm suggesting here is that the village board give me direction on who I should allow that money to be expended to. That would be the recognition element. Other than that, we can walk away. We as a village and village government can totally walk away from acknowledging anybody by simply saying we're not going to allocate any money to either program or any program. We're not going to allocate any of the facility or human resources to any program and not recognize anything as it pertains to that. The mayor is a tie-breaking vote should the village board turn around and come into a deadlock. He is not the
So we've been doing this wrong for all these years. That's what I'm just trying to get at, because we've never. We were totally in the wrong with how we were dealing with this situation.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is each year the village board approved,
and it's always worked, and it's always been something. But we've not had to come to this bickering thing, is what I'm getting at. That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, Trustee Marabella, I absolutely agree with you. This thing got put on my plate because there was a concern from the public as to how the existing program was being run and how the village was going to recognize as the program. Should we, and I use that word we as being the village, choose to walk away from any recognition, it's all based on what's approved in the dollars. What I am asking for as the village administrator is direction from the board on who to direct that money to. That's all I'm asking for, because by doing that, it provides recognition. So if the board decides take that money for the scholarship and take our facilities and we're not going to allocate them anywhere, that is fine. The programs can continue. We're not asking them to stop a program. We're not asking them to start a program. What we're deciding, what's in front of the board this evening, is the decision to allocate financial and facility resources and potentially human resources to either one organization, the other organization, both, or none. All I'm asking for is direction from the board, who approves the budget, where I can allocate that money. If the board says don't allocate it anywhere, I will do what the board says. If the board says allocate it to both, I will do what the board says. If the board says allocate it to none, I will do what the board says. It's not, and I don't know, Bob Long's been here longer than I, and has certainly have some understanding of this deeper than mine, but mine is strictly from an administrative standpoint. A group came to me and asked to be recognized. That recognition comes in what I previously described. Should the board decide to recognize that group by allocating those resources there? That's the question in front of the board. Not is one program my favorite or not their favorite. Have they been here? Who does the board believe is the program that should represent the village, if anyone? Bob, am I off base here, or?
No, maybe the best thing I can do for you at this point in time is kind of recount a little bit of the history and how we got to where we are. Because when I was first retained back in 1997, this was actually a program that was run much, in many respects, like the rec board. The mayor appointed the members of this committee, although informally, mind you, and then there was kind of an official Little Miss and Tiny Miss and Miss Winthrop Harbor, Junior Miss. I think there are 4 of them. And what happened in somewhere around 99, I think it was, there was a dispute. Some of the people that were involved with the program, principally mothers, were upset that things weren't being run the way they wanted to. And there were some difficult times for folks that weren't able to get along with one another very readily about how to run the program. And the details are kind of a long time ago, and I put them out of my mind quite a bit ago, and I can't really drag them all up completely. But the upshot of it was we tried a couple of different iterations of ways through resolutions, to try to find a way to help manage this program in a way that didn't generate controversy, and we were unsuccessful until finally the mayor and the board at that time had just had it. They were in the middle of a complete no-win situation by being both too far into it and yet not controlling it. And so as a result, they finally decided, let's just set them up all on their own. We're not going to manage their money anymore, which was in fact one of the big sticking points. We'll let them figure out where their money comes from, how they're going to get it, and all we're going to do is, when this group, and there was only one at the time, came up with the pageant queens, we would honor the kids, thank them for their duty that they had served, welcome them to the community for the work that they're about to undertake. and then at the same time there was this decision to give this scholarship, this $500. The best of my knowledge, I don't believe it's ever changed. And it's always been budgeted, and it's always been something that was, since there was only one entity, it never had any controversy built into it, and people went along with with the decision made by that group for all these years. And there, I'm not saying it was a perfect arrangement. Every so often something would happen that folks weren't getting along, and there were some friction points here and there. But by and large, the village was able to stay out of this because there wasn't much we could do that was effective in helping. It wasn't a situation where the village is set up to run a pageant. That's not our goal. It's not police and fire and public works and paramedics and emergency response teams. This is an adjunct, if you will, to the rec department at some functional level. And that's how it's existed all these years. I've never really gotten involved in how the $500 is allocated and how it's decided to be spent, because I think it was always just simply given to the one that was selected by this team, budgeted every year. It's well within the mayor's discretionary spending under state law and our local ordinances. So I didn't need ratification. It doesn't require anything unusual by virtue of statutes or local ordinances. This is, in fact, a fairly normal way for pageants to be run at the present time. It's functionally the same as we do in Antioch at the present time. A couple of years ago, a similar situation arose in Waukegan, and there were two competing pageants there, and they decided to do the same thing. They didn't sponsor the pageant. They let the folks figure it out on their own. Now the city council doesn't give a scholarship there. That's the only difference. But you still have somebody going around that's claiming to be Miss Waukegan or Miss Winthrop Harbor or Miss Zion or whatever, and there's some degree of what appears to be officialness or officialdom that's built into this when it really isn't. It's something that comes from a private sector, and yet the kid is going out there, and in all total good faith, they're doing everything I've ever seen. There are very few of them that do anything that would besmirch a community. They do their very best to go out and represent it, but once in a while you get in a situation where you can have competing misses. And I don't know that the villages in particular, or any municipality, is in a really good way to resolve those kinds of issues. Because no matter what you do, the problem is from a public relations standpoint, if you will, you can call it politics, you can call it citizen relations, pick your term. You still have some people that if you make a decision, other people will not be happy with it. And there isn't much in this that, as it was explained to me by the board back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there just wasn't anything in it for the village. It didn't promote harmony. It didn't improve the programs. It didn't make things better for anyone for the village to be involved. And that I think was the single biggest reason that the board at that time decided to step back and get out of the pageant business. And we've been out of it all these years as a result, with just that one remaining tie.
And that's why I put in front of the board recommendations of not recognizing either organization, recognizing one of them, or recognizing both of them. And if you recognize the one of them, and you were asking the recommendation of staff based on the presentations or proposals that were presented, I provided my recommendation solely based on if you were to ask that, if you as a body were to ask that question. And my reasoning behind that staff recommendation. My staff recommendation is that it's just a recommendation. The board can decide not to recognize. It's not my position as the administrator to recognize and say what group should be recognized, shouldn't be recognized, or should we just totally remove ourselves as a village from our recognition of either program and let the two competing programs take the course that they're going to take.
Greg, but wouldn't it also deal with using Winthrop Harbor in their name?
No, Winthrop Harbor can be used in anything. I've brought
Okay,
that up
so we could-
before. Now, however, there's no doubt that the two groups, by perception, are representing the village. You know, whoever the group is, or both groups, that they're using the name to represent themselves as being part of the village, which is something that's happened for however long this program's been going on.
Okay, so we could have multiple groups using the name, you know, Village of Winthrop Harbor pageant system.
My understanding, as Attorney Long just brought up, is Waukegan's had two groups. My understanding is Grays Lake has had two groups. I think Mundelein has, but I can't. Don't quote me on that. I'm not familiar with it, but it's just the information I have received.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
This is Trustee Hargett. So, I mean, just spitballing here, but if you had two pageants and the winners of each of those do some sort of cage match to determine a winner, that would just take it out of our hands. But I think when I first saw this come through, I think my initial reaction was, are we really, is this really something that the board has to get involved in? Now, I will say, fundamentally, I think the pageant and the community service aspect that it's had for years, the way that it helps to grow and shape, young girls in our community is really good, right? So there's no sort of anti-pageant sentiment. I think what they stand for and what both groups want to stand for looks good. I've never had daughters participate in the pageant, but just having attended, from the outside looking in, the current pageant seems to run smoothly. I've had kind of the privilege of speaking at them a couple of times and was always very impressed by the contestants, the organization of the event overall. Now, having said that, when I look at the two proposals that just come before us, if you kind of set any history aside, the proposal from the new group, with the Community 365, they're really kind of proposing two separate things. There's this nonprofit that wants to drive a number of community development efforts, and one of the ways that they'll do that is through the pageant piece. When I look at that, while I respect the kind of years that Cindy has put into the current pageant and think that her heart is in the right place, when you read some of the critiques and just look at the proposal side by side, it does seem that a board and a legitimate nonprofit may be able to more effectively run events like this and be a partner for the village for other initiatives that we may want to move forward.
Mr. Mayor and the board, this is Greg. Let me say this. I think it would help if I add why this even got in front of the board in the first place. This got in front of the board in the first place because there was concerns about how the pageant participants, past and present, were being dealt with by the incumbent program. Now, I haven't done any investigation into if the statements have been fact or if they have been fiction. That's not where I was going with. But what I thought, and I still firmly believe that as the village administrator, it's incumbent upon me, if there is any potential questionable practices by an organization who represents themselves as being part of the village, and our recognition does come because we acknowledge the incumbent organization through the awarding of a scholarship and recognition of the winners. We can't say that, at least from my perspective, that we don't acknowledge that the incumbent organization is serving as Miss Winthrop Harbor and representing the village. Now, whether that representation has been good or poor. I'm not making a decision as to that. I'm not in a position based on the information that I received to represent that. But what I am doing as your village administrator is doing what I think is incumbent upon me, and that is to turn around, let you know that an issue's been raised. I felt this was the best way for the village board as a collective body to address that issue, and it was to make a definitive decision if there should be any recognition, partial recognition, or mutual recognition of both organizations to finally resolve the issue that a group of the community brought forward. So that's how it got in front of you.
But what Attorney Long had said, which was my point through the whole thing, and we wouldn't even be talking about this, and the meeting would be almost over now, is that it's well within the mayor's rights, because of the dollar amount, to make the decision. I don't think we need, like Buddy said, why are we getting involved in this? I think we stay clear of this. But now, if you guys want to all get involved in this, and we want to create a Winthrop Harbor pageant and use taxpayers' money for all this, is that what we really want to do? Do we want to get all involved in this and start this that's my question. And I don't care. My daughter was involved. I love the pageant. I don't care who's running it. My daughter will probably always be involved in it. But I don't want to be a part of that as a village board member. I don't want anything to do with that, personally.
And I respect that, Trustee Marabella, but I've got to tell you, as the village administrator, it sure as heck isn't my place to turn around and decide who the body that's elected by the public
I said the mayor
chooses to represent.
I said the mayor, not the village administrator. Sorry.
No, and I would argue that the $500. This is bigger than the $500 that's within the mayor's threshold. That would be my point, but the body needs to decide that.
If he changed it, that's my whole point. I don't mean to be argumentative here. If he decided to change it, then yes, we put this on the agenda and we deal with all this. If he decides not to, it's a moot point. That's what I'm trying to get at. If the mayor decides he wants to move forward, by golly, we do all this, and I'm all for it, and we'll make a good decision. But if he doesn't decide to, then we shouldn't even be talking about it.
Trustee Weiss here. After having read both sides here and seeing what's going on and not being that familiar with the pageants, it comes down to to me, it looks like the Hatfield and the McCoy. Something went awry here where you got a new group and an incumbent group. And the way I see it, in order for us not to be involved at all, that's including the mayor, I would say that we would have the recognition by the village board of neither program and let both programs run on their own and let the people of Winthrop Harbor decide which program they feel is better or if both of them are better. I feel that the village board should not even be involved in even making this decision, and we should pull the $500 presently and not get involved, period.
On Trustee Marabella's point, I know in the previous years, many years, the mayor made this appointment. Me as the mayor, I've always tried to been very inclusive in getting the village board, the trustees involved in decisions. And because of this, two different entities, I felt the best thing would be to bring it to the board rather than me personally making that decision. I know I've been involved with the pageant in the past when I was a trustee because I was over Park and Rec. And I mean, I'm not involved now, but I do know the individuals on both sides. But I just basically would like to allow the board, the village board, the trustees, look at the proposals which you had in front of you and discuss it this evening. And that's, I don't want to be the sole person making that decision. for the simple reason I want the board to chime in on it and, give me some, feedback.
Well, and this is Trustee Hargit. And I appreciate that, Mayor, that you do bring things like that to us. I will say, just to not kind of stretch the conversation out, I would be fine if we went the route that Trustee Weiss was recommending of saying, hey, we're not going to officially recognize any, we're going to pull the funding, and we can still bring the queens in and honor them and, participate with them. Now, the other one, if though you decide, I want to go with one, I will say when I look at the two proposals, I lean pretty heavily, just looking at the proposals, at the Community 365 one, mostly because I'm intrigued by the larger nonprofit and what they want to do around community development. I know they were also requesting participation from a board member on their nonprofit board to be appointed by the mayor. If we go that route and you end up making an appointment as the trustee over community development, I would volunteer if we did end up in that path. But again, I could go either, I'm fine going with recognizing none, but if we were going to recognize one, I'd personally lean towards that one.
Yeah, Trustee Maribel again. I have no problem with any of it. I know all the people involved and have no issues. I don't get involved in it to say. I mean, my money does, but as me mentally, and I don't. That's something my wife does with my daughter, and I support them. So I don't have any skin in the game at all, either way. I know people on both sides. I do think that the other one, if they're going to move forward that way, but I just don't want to get the village board caught up in anything with it. And I don't mean it that way. I mean it as, so we already do it enough. Do we really want to start, and then we're going to have conflicting stuff come, and then the board's going to go at each other over this stuff? I mean, how does that work?
Well,
But
I've
either
heard
way, I
from
don't care.
Trustee Marabella, I've heard from Trustee Hargit, and I would like to hear from Trustee McCarthy. And
I'm gonna abstain from the discussion, as my wife is listed on one of the proposals, so that's why I have not been speaking.
okay, Dana. No, and then now Trustee Levin.
I've got no issues with both. I mean, I know people on both. Again, if there's an issue and other groups wanting to come in and they feel that there's an issue, maybe the issues need to be brought up. So to be aware, to make the decision a little bit easier. But I could go either way.
Okay. I need a motion from someone. I can't make that motion.
Hey, Mayor, just before can I hear your opinion on it? Since you heard all of ours, what's
I've read both proposals, and they both, the Pageant 365 is very extensive, very in depth, and I've known Cindy Graham for many, many years. So it's a hard decision. I don't. That's why I wanted to get the board involved with this to, get their feedback, and that's why the documentation was in your packet. And we were hoping not to really. We were hoping to see what everybody thought, basically, from that.
What was Trustee Whitmore's thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have a very small village. I don't know why we would necessarily have two. If two groups are wanting and willing to move forward, then I guess that's great. Obviously, being over Parks and Rec, we're going to, I hope we don't run into the issue of maybe the two groups, maybe not coming together as smoothly. Obviously, we'll invite both to all events. Obviously, if there has been issues brought up of the current system, obviously that's nothing that the trustees can get involved with as far as maybe investigating further or, moving forward with those allegations. I think that's something that the village needs to figure out on their own, or maybe, a private entity figuring that out. I don't know. I really don't think this really should have come to us, as a lot of you have stated. But yeah, I mean, I think the more unfortunate part would just be our events through Parks and Recreation. Obviously, the Queens are heavily involved, so I just don't know where that's going to put us with both groups. If it does come down to us having, two different groups.
Trustee Weiss here again. I really look at this, and as I've been hearing, the village board really needs to be neutral on this, because we have two parties involved here that, they're seeing certain things, and they're making presentations in two different ways. And the incumbent presentation, from the past, looks like it's been pretty successful. And with 365, they're very much in depth, and it really is more of a business-like, I'd say, proposition. So the way I look at it, the village board shouldn't even be involved in this, to just, to stay neutral. For the simple fact, this is not really a village function. We can probably, for both, if they want to use the facilities, maybe give them a cost reduction for using the facilities if one has it on 1 month and one has it on another month. But as far as the recognition, I feel that the board needs to stay out of this, just to be neutral, because there's too many emotions involved on both sides. And I think as a village board, we've got many more pressing needs that are coming up, especially with COVID-19, revenue, so on and so forth. So I really feel that the recognition by the village board of neither program would be probably the best route for all of us to go, and I would make that into a formal motion, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, this is Greg. Before that motion is acted upon, can I interject something?
Yes.
Right. First of all, if I want to make sure it's clear to the board that of all the things that are across my desk, with everything that's going on with COVID, civil unrest, making staffing adjustments, trying to accommodate those staffing adjustments to meet the needs of the public, this is not one of those things I needed to cross my desk. This is not one of those things I needed to respond to. So, I shouldn't say that, because I chose to respond to it. But let me say this. For any trustee, and I say this with all due respect to the offices, to turn around and say that this should never have come before the board, or I don't understand why this came before the board, let me say with no hesitation that there were members of the group who addressed me in a call on a Wednesday evening, who dropped the names of trustees who they said to call me and contact me about this issue. Now, I will do whatever elected official asks me to do, because that is my job and that is the job of our staff. But I have a difficult time sitting here listening to statements of absolution, of I don't understand, and how did this get in front of the board, when I've heard through multiple sources that trustees have directed this request to me. I have no regrets about presenting the package that I did to the board. I don't want anybody on the board to think that I have a regret about that, because I did what I believed was in the best interest of serving our community and the board. And if it was something that I should have given a second thought to, okay, I've learned from that from this situation. But when board members talk to me, or when board members talk to members of the community and ask those members of the community to call me because of this, because of the circumstances, I feel an obligation not only to respond to that trustee talking to that constituent, but to that constituent because they took the time to call me. What's in front of you as a board is a decision to either not recognize one or recognize both. I have no skin in the game other than to make sure that the village of Winthrop Harbor is properly served by the decision that's made, and make sure I present the board with the information that I think will help them make their decision. But with all due respect again to the offices of some of the members sitting on the dais, I will tell you that I take exception to the fact that this thing should have never come before the board when it was prompted to come before the board. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have to say.
That's fine. This is Trustee Maribel again. You did your job. Nobody's questioning that. I was prompting the mayor to step up, and he explained why he didn't. That's all I was getting.
My remarks weren't directed to you. My remarks weren't directed to you, Trustee.
Okay, we had a motion from Trustee Weiss. Would you like
We
to
have
repeat
a
that
motion from Trustee Weiss. Let's just clarify what that motion is, because it's been a lot of talking since then. The motion was to divorce, essentially remove the village from the debate and let the pageant run itself. Is that correct, Trustee?
Yes, to the village board, not to recognize neither program.
Okay. Then there needs to be a second, or move along with this motion.
I need a second on that motion.
Trustee Levin, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Target,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Marabella,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Yeah.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board.
All right, move on to clerk's correspondence.
May
I have
I,
nothing.
may I ask a question at this point, Mayor, Mr. Mayor?
Because
Because there has been conversation about this $500, if that is in the budget and we're not going to recognize anybody, does that $500 come out, or what is? Because I think that's a lingering chad at this point in time, a hanging chad.
Mr. Mayor, to Attorney Long's point, that money would have came out of the tourism and promotion fund for the budget. What I would do is, as long as it's not going to be an expenditure by virtue of by the decision that's made by the board, then I'm going to assume that I just that line will zero out as an expenditure for this year, with no expenditure being given. Because to Attorney Long's point, the money's been budgeted. If this vote has decided we are not recognizing, then we are not authorizing the spending of that amount of money in that budget line.
correct.
Is that what you're asking for, Bob?
Yeah, that was exactly my point. I thought we should have clarification at this point, because you don't want to leave the impression it's not really for the board or for the public so much as it is for the kids that compete in this pageant. If they think that there's still going to be a $500 check, and you have to go back and tell them after they've competed that no, it's really not there, that doesn't seem fair. That doesn't strike me as terribly fair to them. So I think having a little clarity up front is helpful.
And in response to that, Mr. Mayor, my intent was based off of the decision by the board tonight to send out written communication to both organizations as to the decision of the board. But I will also include in that communication that even though they're free to do what they want to do as far as a pageant, that there will not be a expenditure on the part of the villages, and certainly I'll make the language appropriate for that.
Very good. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Attorney Long, for that $500. I wasn't thinking about that, but thank you for that. So we move on to clerk's correspondence.
I have nothing.
All right, there is no old business, so we move on to New business, committee reports, finance, trustee Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that we approve accounts payable warrant 2020-6 in the amount of $208,279.35.
I need a second.
Trustee Levin, second.
Trustee Levin, second. Okay, any discussion on the warrant? Roll call, please.
Target,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Marabella,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, trustee Weiss. We move on to the fire department. Trustee Levin.
All right, the first item is more or less an open discussion. It's about discussion of the fire department staffing and equipment needs. If everybody looks in there, seeing that information that was in their packet, and I think Greg could probably explain it a lot better, or Chief Streed.
Just to continue to make the board aware, Trustee Levin had a concern that as we had turned around and continue to look at funding various functions going forward in this fiscal year and future fiscal years, that we keep in mind that just as we had, as been represented by Trustee Marabella, his concerns about infrastructure, Trustee Whitmore on the parks and recreation, and the Trustee Hargett with community development, that we continue to make sure that we understand that from a public safety perspective, there remains needs at the fire department. Two things that need to be looked at is the age of the equipment and the lack of equipment. Specifically, I speak to the rescue boat that we've tried multiple avenues to secure a boat for the harbor. But the aging equipment with the ambulance, as well as the engine equipment, repairs to the truck, and that's all been documented by Trustee Levin in his recent review of the equipment at the fire station. We know, going back as far as 6 to 8 months, that Chief Streed has well represented his department and his concerns regarding the model that we currently use for firefighting and providing EMS services in the village, and that model being a part-time, paid-on-call, paid-on-premise hybrid model that has served the village well for a number of years, especially when you had a number of firefighters who were living in town and were able to respond effectively and efficiently when the call out happened. But now we're starting to see firefighters using us as a training ground, allowing them to pursue fire service in other communities, either because of greater monetary compensation or benefits, a combination of both. We knew this year when we made this past fiscal year, when we made an amendment to the wage and policy ordinance, allowing us additional financial incentive for coverage of paramedic personnel in the evening hours. We know that the bulk of the calls in the fire service now are EMS versus actual working fires, and that paramedics are a priority for us and any municipality to have on staff. As we look to move forward, Chief Streed and I had talked about a STEP program for purposes of retention of the firefighter staff. We talked about the potential of applying for the AFG grants, the SAFER grants, to hire full-time firefighters, under the premise and under the knowledge of we would have to retain those firefighters or else be on the hook for the costs up until that point, and then eventually develop a model of full-time paid on premise, another hybrid of full-time paid on premise firefighters, evolving into that model, which I would argue in defense of Chief Streed that eventually, unless the village intends to find an alternate source for fire service and EMS, that is the model that inevitably this village will have to go to. The time frame on when that will happen remains to be seen, but it's inevitable based on the firefighter retention and firefighter training that something is going to give soon. To identify that soon on a calendar is difficult, I think, for both myself and Chief Streed. But in an effort to be proactive, we have to respond to that. So we had also potentially talked about identifying alternate revenue sources to be dedicated strictly for public safety purposes, and to put a caveat to that, fire service. We are in a position because of COVID that we have to maintain the status quo, but that still poses challenges, not only from a standpoint of staffing and meeting needs regarding equipment, but where do we go from here, and are we going to be able to meet budget? The fire department was the only budget that was presented that maintained, almost short of a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, the status quo from last year's actuals to this year's budget. And that's because of the constraints that Chief Streed's under. So Trustee Levin expressed a concern about making sure that this was on the radar for the village board. We know we've talked about this in front of the village board for 6 to 9 months previous to the budget, shortly after my appointment as administrator. But again, that the trustee had asked that this documentation be provided by the board to get a sense of the financial impact.
This is Trustee
I want to
Hargit.
thank Greg for researching this, and also like to thank Trustee Levin for asking for this. This is very thorough. I wasn't familiar with a lot of this items in this document, but I'm very glad I have it now and know the situation over at the fire department with the equipment.
This is Trustee Hargit. Greg, do we have any sense of what the cost would be for the 2 feasibility studies that are mentioned, either outsourcing or for intergovernmental agreement?
No, we haven't looked at it. We're waiting. We would be waiting for direction of the board. The intergovernmental agreement would have to be if we talked about a consolidation type of intergovernmental agreement, it would have to be with Zion. We had potentially talked about or had looked at the potential of Newport Fire Prevention District, but because of geographic boundaries and requirements for that type of consolidation, it's not feasible. In fact, I shouldn't say it's not feasible. It can't happen. Bob can correct me if I'm wrong on it, but I think it has to do with the geographic boundaries and the contiguous and the continuity with those boundaries. So we would be looking at some. Thank you. So we'd be looking at something that's either a consolidation with Zion, which is something that the city of Highland Park did with Highwood, or we would be looking at the outsourcing of EMS, fire, or both, which after lengthy discussions with Chief Streed, it's not practical. The turnover would still exist as people look to those jobs as a stepping stone to other full-time fire departments. And plus, there's a cost that has to be realized with that, and that cost is short of a pension of a full-time fire department, which we don't pay now. Those costs would mirror those, if not exceed those of what we're currently doing. If there is an interest in a feasibility study on the consolidation with the Zion Fire Department, I would certainly move forward with that if that was the board's choice. I will say this, as I've said in the past in multiple documents over the last year, is that I would remind the village that if the village chooses to outsource or consolidate their fire department and they are not happy with the services being rendered based on our village size and our financial condition, we are in a difficult, if not impossible position to turn around, say we're unsatisfied with our service, and to rebuild a fire department from scratch. And I think impossible is not an exaggeration. So I would say that, and that would hold true for our law enforcement as well. It is a decision that if there's a cost savings that I will go back and refer to again to Highland Park and Highwood. They made the decision that the cost savings outweighed any idea of them or future boards or residents to want to bring back their own fire department. They've made that decision. By all accounts, I haven't heard anything that they're dissatisfied, but nor do I think that I would be necessarily privy to that. So it's a decision available to the board, but I would again remind the board that it is a significant step to make not only for the present conditions of the board, but the present conditions of the village, but also for the future services to the village.
Trustee Weiss here. Greg, I would have to agree with you that once something is basically removed, it's extremely, almost impossible to recreate it. It's cost prohibitive. It's something that I don't know if any of the other trustees have ever been through this, but the amount of money that's going to be expended to try to recreate it is you just can't imagine. I know that we're in huge financial constraints, and I think that the tool that you've offered to us is to look at the budget on a quarterly basis, that we can possibly take small steps to see if we can correct certain things. And hopefully in the future, with the governments, with the federal government, the county government, and the state, being able to help us through some of these financial constraints that we have, that in the future we might be able to come up with some plans with the village property, look at some of the assets that we have, some of the things in the budget that we can possibly do away with after we look at it for a couple of quarters. So it's a step-by-step process, because this is something that a lot of municipalities are going through. And like I said, once you remove something, to recreate it and to come back and try to put it back together again, it's virtually impossible, and it's going to be cost prohibitive.
Oh, go ahead. Just Trustee Marabella.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Trustee.
No, the point, Fritz made a good point, and the fire department's been near and dear to me for a long time. I've had family members on it. A lot of the guys there, I've recently spoken to some, they do this, they're on other departments. They do this just because they've came here, they've done this before, and they do it kind of out of respect, either for the chief or for the department. And they don't necessarily have to do it for the amount of money they're getting. So I just want people to be aware of that. We have a very good team of firemen and women that do this a lot, not for pay, a lot because they like doing it and they like the community. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I want to state this too. This is the first year of an administrator. It's been 1 year and 1 month this month. And this is the first time that any village board has had a comprehensive look at anything, not by virtue of Greg Jackson, but virtue of the position, where everything gets put together and put in front of you, and decisions are being, or situations asking for decisions to be made are put in front of you that may not have been even presented before as a comprehensive plan. That being said, we need to keep in mind that we are in no different position than every other municipality except those who had $1 million in reserve, and I use that as an arbitrary number, that are trying to fight this situation, that unprecedented situation that we find ourselves in. Trustee Mirabella has certainly said over the months that I have been the village administrator, where one water main break, where one major infrastructure collapse from putting us in a position that will be difficult for us to get out. And he's absolutely 600, 700, 800% correct. The fire department is on its heels because of a staffing issue, and we sit there, and Justin and I, Chief Street and I, talk about how are we going to replace the ambulance? How are we going to replace the engines? How are we going to turn around and make sure that we've got paramedics on call to respond to EMS needs at night when the public expects it? And Justin, being a member of this community, this hits him dear and hard. We've got Pat DePercio in community development that is sitting there trying to juggle economic development and community development at the same time and cannot effectively do it because we've had to make some tough decisions to modify our staffing needs. So I have just turned around and started doing some economic development. I am acquiring the responsibilities for chief financial officer as well as chief administrative officer. We've all stepped up to turn around and do things because we know we need to meet the needs of the public. We are going to have problems. We are going to turn around and have a difficult time delivering public goods and services from every department, including Parks and Rec, including Public Works, including Fire and Police, because of the financial situation we're in. We need to accept that, but we also need to be aware of where our most vulnerable areas are, so that we can turn around and keep those on the radar and put those first and foremost. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say we're not in this boat by ourselves. We're in this boat with the Waukegans and the North Chicagos and the Zions and the Beach Parks and the Wadsworth. We're in my opinion, a better position than some of those because this village board responded to the request that we asked of the village board in order to turn around and make financial adjustments and still meet the needs in the delivery of goods and services. There's not a department head here who I wouldn't say did not step up to the plate. Not a single department head. But with Trustee Levin's document, what he's trying to convey for the department he serves as liaison to is that, you know what, I recognize where we're at. I recognize we have issues. And I recognize we approved a budget that best meets our needs based on the snapshot in time regarding expenditures and revenues. But please keep in mind, this is what's out there. So when we start looking to spending money or acquiring funds, this is an issue, or these are issues that should definitely be addressed. My apologies for dragging on.
Thank you, Greg. The document is a very thorough document, and I'm just glad to have this information in front of me that I can go back and look at. But I know there's issues in the fire department with part-time firefighters, and years and years and years ago, the police department used to be in the same boat. We had police officers coming here and got trained here, and then they went to other departments. And if that's happening here, we'll have to definitely address that in the near future, so we don't have that happen, or at least slow it down so it doesn't happen as much. But I agree, and all the equipment in here as well. I'm just glad that Trustee Levin asked for this, and I'm definitely going to hang on to it and pin it on my desk here on my board, and have it in front of me. So.
I want to make sure one more statement, Mr. Mayor, and I'm dragging this out, but it should not be, and I don't think it is, but it bears a statement. For a minute, we should not think that Chief Street has been remiss in putting this out there, because every opportunity he's had to communicate his concerns, he has, not only to me, but he's also stood in front of the board and communicated those. So, just know that you've got a dedicated service chief in Chief Street.
Oh, I absolutely know that, and it's not what I meant to say. I mean, if that's what everybody kind of got out of what I just said.
That's not where I was going with it, Mayor. It was me making sure that people recognized him.
Understandable. I think we got a phenomenal chief in Chief Street, and the fire department. I think he does a phenomenal job with the issues he has over there. Absolutely. So, but very good. Any other comments on the fire department staffing and equipment needs? All right. We don't need a motion or a second. We'll move on to the second item. Trustee Levin.
I'll make a motion, we accept the ComEd grant for the fire department, for a total amount of $8,690.
Trustee Marabella,
Trustee
second.
Weiss, second.
All right. Trustee Marabella seconded. Discussion? I would like to just, I read the document in our board packet. It basically says the total requested for the program is $8,690, and then half of that will be reimbursed as part of the grant. So we're actually only getting $4,345. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that was in the minutes. Any other discussion on that? Okay. Roll call, please.
Target,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Marabella,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, Trustee Levin. We move on to police. Trustee McCarthy.
Okay, so just for some clarification, since this is an ordinance, do I have to make a motion to waive the first and second readings for it?
Yes, I believe
Yep.
you do.
Okay, so that's just a motion to waive the first and second and adopt as presented, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so I make a motion to waive the first and second readings and adopt the ordinance amending the administrative fee for police vehicle tows as presented.
Trustee Marabella, second.
All right. Discussion? We're just increasing the fees, correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay. I'm
And
sure
that-
everyone read their document. I'm just going from 350 to 500.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I wanted to get in the minutes as well. All right. Any other discussion on that? I'll ask for a roll call.
Just to clarify, Mayor, I
Yes.
think you said, how much did you say?
It was 350. It's going up to 500.
Okay.
I believe
that
that's
is
what
correct.
the document said.
It better.
Okay.
That's what I typed.
I read it, but,
That is what I typed, so.
okay. I mean, I read it, so, I mean, I could be mistaken, but, because I don't have it in front of me right now, it's just going by memory, so. But, okay, very good, yes. So, any other discussion? I'll ask again. All right, ask for a roll call.
Target,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Marabella,
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
Motion carried. We were public comments. Did we have anyone turn in any questions by 4 o'clock today?
No, we did not.
All right. So we move on to unfinished business. I'll start with Trustee Weiss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, Greg, I want to thank you for your insight, your leadership. It takes a lot of pressure off of the trustees, as I've been on the board for a little while, off and on. So thank you again for your leadership on this, and then for the months to come, especially in the financial aspect of it, and seeing how we can pull ourselves up a little bit better in the financial department, helping the fire department, all departments, and what they need, especially to prioritize the most urgent needs altogether. Again, thank you to all the department heads for pulling together and doing all the extra duties and the extra jobs and helping one another. This is a real team effort. I'm very proud of Winthrop Harbor, the The village trustees, the mayor, Greg, all the department heads, we're all in this together, as I keep saying, and we just need to keep pulling together. And I'm just proud of each and every one of you people, and just proud to be living in Winthrop Harbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Weiss. Trustee Levin.
I'd like to thank Greg for helping me get this document together and his insight on all of it. I just wanted to be open and transparent with everybody, let them know, everyone know what was going on. And thank Chief Street for his patience in all this. It's nerve-wracking to see that, guys are working more than their share just to keep our department going. So big thank you, Greg and Chief, for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Trustee. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Levin. Trustee Marabella.
Yeah, I'll just like to say thanks. I know I say a lot of things, but I believe our community's doing great because of what we put in place and what we're trying to do. I know everybody works hard, and everybody that's in the position they're in does their best to fulfill that position. I really believe that. I know my guys have been working hard. I'm more focused on them because that's what I have to do, but I see it through everybody. And I know I say it every week, but with the village administrator, it's helped us a lot. It brings a lot of stuff to fruition like it did tonight, which is helpful. It's very helpful. It helps everybody to do their job better. So I just want to say I appreciate everything that everybody has done, and be safe. And I know my guys and Tim and them, they're working hard. They're helping out Scott whenever they can. And as it opens up more, we'll be able to do more things with the public works, but we're limited on what we can do to this point. That's all I got.
Thank you, Trustee Marabella.
Thank you.
Trustee Hargett.
Yeah, I wanted to hit on just a couple of things around economic development. The first one is a few weeks back, there was a virtual town hall for the Northern Lakeshore Trail Connectivity Plan. And then they now have published their draft plan out on their website. So you can go to connectthenorthernlakeshore.com and look at that full draft plan. And it shows where all the connections are that they want to make from Winthrop Harbor to North Chicago, where some of the east-west connections might be to other trail systems within each of the communities. And it has kind of solid lines to show where existing trails are, dotted lines to show where things would need to be put in. They have examples of the wayfinding signage and branding they want to use, but it's really exciting seeing that come together. So we want to keep promoting that, but go check that out again, connectthenorthernlakeshore.com. The other thing I wanted to highlight is Greg, Pat, the mayor, and I, we've been talking a lot about, how do we recover? How do we continue with economic development efforts despite some of the challenges that we're in right now and that we anticipate being in with a recession for the short-term future. And a lot of that, we look at what is our role as government in that, and I think we can look at our lakefront and see that as a huge success as far as activating a portion of our community. And, it was the village that pushed to get the beach cleaned up. And when you're down there right now, even with social distancing, even with some of the erosion issues, the beach has been packed on hot days. We see, private operation and the effect that has with West Trek and occupancy growing and new events coming. And then now with Harbor Brewing opening their location down there, the village was involved in getting the nature observation tower put in and the new trail in the Spring Bluff Forest Preserve. So we look at that and say, well, that was a success in driving traffic here, but we need more. And I think what we're anticipating with the recession is that larger developers are going to continue looking elsewhere. It's going to be hard to find in general, but they're going to look for those ready sites in prime locations. And so there's an idea that I've been kicking around for a while now with Pat, and I've talked to a couple of board members about it, but brought that back to the mayor and Greg recently, and we actually walked the triangle today looking at this idea of micro retail, of how do you basically develop like tiny house size shops that would sit within the triangle that are very unique in nature and run events in that piece of property as well. We've talked about the potential of, with the rec department pulling out the playground and replacing it with something that may be more attractive, like a splash pad, spray ground type of thing. There are also ones that convert into ice rinks in the winter. But it seems like we're increasingly seeing grant opportunities that may assist in some of this, academic interest and research groups interested in this type of micro retail development. And so there are a couple of examples that I had shared with the mayor and Greg, one in Pennsylvania, one in Michigan. And so I'm going to ask Greg if you can forward that to all the board members to just be able to kind of visualize, like, oh, this is what they're talking about. But we want to move pretty aggressively on this concept. So we walked it today. Baxter Woodman is putting together or sending us some maps of that location so we can start trying to plot out. We want to make sure that there still is room in that development for some of the things we've been talking about, a potential hotel or senior housing, other mixed use, potentially another restaurant. And as we walked it today, we think that can fit. We want to get the actual parcel maps and plot things out and make sure that there's room for this. But we see micro retail as a way to offer something unique in our community, have another kind of hub location where people can come and just hang out while also shopping, eating, and offer, smaller festivals, that sort of thing in that location as well. So I've talked with several of you about this already, but wanted to just get that idea up there. And especially now as we look at the market, it seems like the right time to move aggressively. But again, understanding our financial situation, we're going to be looking for grants to try and move on this.
Thank you, Trustee Hargett. I would also say that you haven't been in Village Hall, I don't know, but today I walked in, there's easels from the Northern Lakeshore Trail Connectivity Plan, and they're huge easels and huge boards, but they also show the different trails and the ones they want to connect. It's one I actually was looking at it today for quite some time before the meeting. It's very thorough, so come on in and take a look. Thank you, Trustee Hargett. We'll move on to Trustee McCarthy.
Yeah, I just want to speak briefly, now the vote is over. On the issue of, the pageant coming before the board, I just want to point out that, anytime an outside organization acts in partnership, whether that's an official partnership or an informal one with the village, that it is, I think, our prerogative and our responsibility to be aware of a number of things, such as, is that organization acting in good stead? Are they representing us well? And there was an informal partnership in the use of facilities and sponsorship and them being allowed, certain privileges with certain events and everything. So there is a responsibility for the board to be aware that, what the structure is, what the finances are there. So I disagree with the idea that it should not be coming before us. And we set that precedent, or at least solidified in my belief with HarborQ. I mean, they were ones that, while they would say that the village was not a sponsor, the fact was we were in an informal partnership, and the fact that we let them use village resources, gave them discounts and things, and in return, we expected them to meet certain standards when it came to the status of their organization, things like that. So I very much think that any type of organization that either that represents the village either officially and formally or informally in any way that, people, majority of people have the impression that they are officially tied to us, it is an issue for the village board to monitor and to be aware of and to make decisions on. So that's all I'll say on that. Thank you, Greg, for all the work you've done putting things together the last few weeks and beyond that. And that's it.
Thank you, Trustee McCarthy.
Thank you, Trustee.
Trustee Whitmore.
Yes, I just want to thank Tim and all of Public Works for really helping out Parks and Rec during this time. They're out there constantly helping us with 38 acres, just getting everything mowed, and really is helping out Scott a lot. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of Public Works' help throughout this time.
Thank you, Trustee Whitmore. My comments, basically, I want to also, the Harbor Shores Community Newsletter we just had sent out and mailed. I want to thank all the departments for putting together their part of the newsletter, and thank Greg for coordinating that. It's always very thorough, and it's very well done, and it's very professional. This Thursday, or tomorrow, or 2 days from now, I'll be having my first brown bag with Bruno, lunch in the park. Believe I got several people coming to have lunch with me. So today, I put out, earlier this evening, I should say, I released a video addressing the state of the budget. It tells the public exactly the challenges we face. I want to thank all the trustees here who approved the budget. These are challenging times, and it's more important for us when we come together. And I just wanted to say thank you. I also want to thank all the trustees and their contributions for unfinished business and the departments they are, liaisons over, all that you do, and all the department heads working together with you. I know everybody does their thing, and once we do it, as a team, it always comes out. The village is, definitely everything is going good with the village, and I hope that continues. I'm sure it will. But I just wanted to basically say that you can find that on my Facebook, my Mayor Dr. Michael Bruno Facebook page, if you'd like to listen to the video. That's all I have, so I would just ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Trustee Weiss.
We have a motion by Trustee
Weiss?
Okay. Need a second?
Second, Trustee Marabella.
Thank you. Roll call.
Target,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Marabella.
Aye.
McCarthy,
Aye.
Weiss,
Aye.
Whitmore.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.